We're diving deep into the keys. We're going to uncover the secrets of how keyboard instruments actually work. I mean, from the quietest little practice tools all the way to those massive kings of music that, need their own building.
It's a great mission because when you just look at a row of black and white keys, they all seem the same. But what happens when you press down? Well, the way they make sound is just wildly different.
And that universal pattern is really the power of these instruments, right? It's such a clear visual layout, which makes learning music a lot simpler. And it lets one person play a bunch of notes chords at the same time.
Exactly. And if you look at the whole history, there are really three main mechanical ways to make a sound. You either hit strings, you pluck strings, or you blow air. And then, of course, the 20th century brought in all the huge possibilities of electricity.
So we're going to trace that whole mechanical journey. We'll look at about 10 different instruments and see how they get their unique sound. Let's start with the ones that use actual physical strings and probably with the heavyweight champion, the piano.
The piano is definitely the celebrity of the family. You find it in pretty much every concert hall and a lot of homes today. But the core mechanism, they call it the action, is incredibly complex.
The action, okay.
So when you press a key, that key sets off this whole system of levers and pads that ends with a felt hammer swinging up and striking a set of tight metal strings.
Okay, wait. If the hammer just hits the strings, how does the piano get such a huge range of expression? Because if you've ever played one, you can play a note so quiet you can barely hear it, or so loud it feels like thunder.
Well, that right there is the revolution of the piano. The action is built to be sensitive to velocity. The speed and the force you use to press the key changes how hard the hammer hits the string.
Ah, so that's why its original name was pianoforte.
Exactly, the Italian for soft loud. Before the piano, most keyboard instruments just couldn't do that.
So that ability to control volume, to go from a whisper to a roar in an instant, that fundamentally changed music. It must have been a huge engineering challenge, though, getting that hammer to strike and then instantly get out of the way so the note can actually ring out.
A massive challenge.
Yeah.
A standard piano has 88 keys, and every single one needs a perfectly calibrated mechanism. And then you've got the pedals, the right one. The sustain pedal is so important. It lifts these things called dampers off the strings, so the note just keeps ringing out.
But they're delicate, too. All that tension on the strings and the wood frame means they need constant care.
Right. They need professional tuning because temperature and humidity are always messing with the tension.
Okay, so if the piano is the striker, we have to talk about its predecessor, the harpsichord. This was the main instrument in European classical music before the piano took over, and it sounds completely different.
It's the plucker. It might look like a grand piano, but when you press the key, the mechanism is totally distinct. Instead of a hammer, a tiny strip of material. It used to be a bird's quill, but now it's often plastic. It's called a plectrum. And it grabs the string and quickly plucks it.
And that pluck is what gives it that bright, sharp, almost metallic sound that you hear in a lot of Baroque music. But that leads to the big limitation that separated it from the piano: dynamics.
Exactly. How hard you press the key doesn't really matter. The plectrum is going to pluck that string with about the same intensity every single time. So to play louder or softer, musicians had a couple of complicated options.
Option one being those instruments with two rows of keyboards, right, stacked on top of each other so they could just switch between two different sets of strings, one quiet and one loud.
Right. Or option two, composers just had to get really creative with complex interwoven melodies to build drama, instead of using loud and soft. The harpsichords themselves were often these beautiful, highly decorated pieces of art too, a real status symbol.
That brings us to the quietest of the stringed instruments, the clavichord. The harpsichord was for an audience. The clavichord feels like it was meant for just one person.
It was the intimate striker. Very old, very quiet. The composer J.S. Bach apparently used it all the time for practicing and composing, and is often small enough to just sit on a tabletop.
The mechanism here is what's really unique. It uses a small metal blade called a tangent to strike the string. But, and this is the key difference from the piano, the tangent stays in contact with the string after it hits it.
And because it stays pressed against the string, the player can actually influence the sound after the note starts. You can wiggle the key a little bit, and that makes the string vibrate. It creates this effect called vibrato.
You can't do that on a modern piano, that ability to shape the sound after the note begins. But like you said, that intimacy has a big limitation.
Oh, it's so soft, so quiet. It's completely unsuitable for big concert halls or playing with other instruments. It's really meant for a private, personal experience.
That feels like a great turning point. We've gone from the whisper of the clavichord, and now we're moving to instruments designed for a shout that could be heard across a whole town, the windblowers.
And there is no greater example of sheer scale and volume than the pipe organ. They justly call it the king of instruments.
So no strings. Instead, it uses a massive supply of forced air blown through hundreds or even thousands of pipes. The physical size is just incredible. I mean, these pipes can be just a few inches long or over 30 feet tall.
And the big engineering challenge is getting that constant wind pressure. Older organs use huge bellows that someone had to pump, and modern ones have these massive electric blowers.
The controls for the player are equally massive. You've got multiple keyboards for your hands, they call them manuals, and a huge board of keys for your feet, the pedal board. So how does the organist choose which pipe makes a sound?
That's where the stops come in. Those are all the knobs and tabs you see around the keyboard. And they aren't just for volume. They're basically telling the organ which specific set of pipes the air should flow into.
So if you pull the flute stop, it sounds like a flute. If you pull trumpet, it sounds like a trumpet.
Precisely. It lets the organist mix and match, sounds like a whole orchestra. And what's really fascinating is that because organs are custom built right into the architecture of a church or a hall, no two pipe organs are exactly the same.
Wow. From the massive, unmovable king, let's swing to the total opposite. The ultimate portable wind instrument, the accordion, or the squeeze box.
The accordion is so unique because you can carry it and play it while you're standing up. It's basically two boxes joined by a flexible center, the bellows. When the player pushes and pulls the bellows, air moves across these little internal metal strips called reeds.
So it's the same core technology as a pipe organ reeds, but just miniaturized. The layout is complicated, but it makes sense. You've got the piano keys on the right for the melody, and on the left, a whole bunch of buttons for bass notes and chords.
And since it makes a big sound without needing an amplifier, it became a huge part of folk music and dancing. It can cut through the noise of a crowded room. It's a remarkably tough instrument.
And that toughness reminds me of the harmonium, or the pump organ. It used to be common in small schools and churches, and it's still critically important in the music of India and Pakistan.
Yeah, it's a type of organ that uses those same metal reeds, not the big pipes. The key difference is how you get the air. The player has to pump pedals with their feet to build up the air pressure.
Or pump it by hand on smaller versions. It has this really warm, steady sound. It's excellent for leading groups singing. And crucially, it's built to be super sturdy and handle different climates, which is why it thrives in places a grand piano would just fall apart.
And that takes us to our third big category. Instruments that rely on striking metal, or more recently, just pure electrical power. We're moving into the modern era.
Let's start with an instrument that kind of feels like it doesn't belong, but it uses a keyboard, the celesta. It looks like a small piano, but it sounds magical, like little shimmering bells.
That's the trick. You press a key, but instead of hitting a string, the hammers strike metal plates or bars that are suspended over wooden resonators.
Wait, if it's hammer striking metal bars, does that mean the celesta is technically a percussion instrument?
It is. It's play with a keyboard, but it's classified as percussion. It was invented in France in the late 19th century. Composers use it when they want to create this sense of mystery or magic. It's famously in Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy.
Moving into the 20th century, we get the electric piano. You know, the Rhodes or the Wurlitzer. They were huge in rock and jazz because they sort of bridge that gap between acoustic and digital.
This is where it gets really technical and cool. They don't have a big wooden soundboard to make the sound louder. Instead, they have small metal pieces that get struck, and those vibrations are turned into an electric signal using electromagnetic pickups.
The pickup, that's exactly what an electric guitar uses. So the vibration gets captured, turned into electricity, and then sent to an amplifier and a speaker so you can hear it.
And this gave musicians huge advantages. First, they're much easier to transport than a real piano. And second, since the sound is electronic, you can add effects, like that wavering tremolo sound, or a gritty distortion. That was vital for rock and roll.
And finally, we get to the instruments that define so much modern music. Digital keyboards and synthesizers. These are all about computer power and electronic circuits.
They have zero internal strings or pipes or reeds, nothing. They make sound in two main ways. They either play back recorded samples of real instruments, like a perfect digital recording of a piano, or they use synthesis to generate completely new sound waves from scratch.
And generating sound waves from scratch is what makes them so powerful. They can sound like a realistic violin, or they can sound like a heavy bass line, or a spaceship taking off.
And the practical advantages are huge, especially for students. They're lightweight, they're affordable, and most importantly, they often have a headphone jack for silent practice. Synthesizers in particular are covered with knobs and sliders so you can change the sound in real time.
Okay, so we've gone through 10 completely different instruments, but here's the amazing thing. Despite all those different mechanisms, hammers, quills, winds, circuit boards, they all share the exact same interface.
Absolutely. The simple fact is that almost all keyboards share that same basic layout that just fits the human hand. It's a standard that's held for centuries.
And the constants are key for any student. The white keys are the natural notes, A through G. The black keys are the sharps and flats in those repeating groups of twos and threes, low notes on the left, high notes on the right.
Learning that pattern is the single most important step because that one skill unlocks everything from the giant pipe organ to the smallest digital keyboard.
But because they all have so many moving parts, they need careful maintenance. Let's talk about the specific care that's linked to these mechanisms we just discussed.
Well, we started with acoustic pianos, full of wood and string tension. Because humidity makes that wood frame expand and contract, which loosens the strings, they need professional tuning at least once a year. The complex action parts also need to be lubricated so the hammers move freely.
And for the wind blowers, dust is a huge enemy. It can clog the little openings in organ pipes and reeds, which can change the tone, or even worse, make them stop working entirely.
And dust is just as bad for electronics. It gets on the circuit boards and can make them overheat. For any keyboard, acoustic or digital, you've got to keep them away from direct sunlight and heaters. That can crack the wood or even melt the plastic.
And just cleaning the keys themselves with a soft cloth is important. Proper maintenance isn't just about protecting the instrument, it makes it more enjoyable to play for decades.
It really does. Taking care of those mechanisms, whether it's a tiny metal reed or a sensitive felt hammer, is just critical.
So we've seen how pressing one key can do everything from making a felt hammer strike, to a metal tangent creating vibrato, to a huge gust of wind shooting through a 30-foot pipe.
Or even just a computer generating a perfect sound wave from a circuit board.
And that simple, standard layout of white and black keys has connected musicians across centuries.
Yeah, that one basic skill really is the master key to unlocking this whole world of sound.
So as you listen to music this week, think about whether the sounds you're hearing are plucked, struck, blown, or just generated by code and electricity. Good luck with your studies.